Before starting, tell us from where you are seeing us and if you agree that the service to this country has no expiration date. I like and subscribe because what happened to the man you are about to know should never happen to anyone who has dressed the uniform. His name was Robert King, Bobby, for those who best knew him. And in that quiet Tuesday morning, I was not looking for attention. I was not there to make a scene, nor to show off medals, nor to boast of battles of yesteryear. All I wanted, it was to withdraw a few $100s from an old account that I had not touched in years, the same account that used decades ago to deposit the pay by danger of deployment that the government does not yet recognize. He entered through the main doors of the Summit-rich National Bank like any other person, firm, quiet, hat in hand. That hat, a black hat embroidered with golden thread that said veteran from Korea, Vietnam, had been brushed before leaving home. His shirt was ironed, although the fists were dissociated, and in the pocket of his coat, he carried a folded card of veteran affairs, two papers of low-worn, and a brass challenge currency, softened by the use at the edges. He wrote patiently in silence, as the men of his time usually do, as if waiting for your turn remained sacred. But at the time he reached the counter, everything changed. The cashier, perhaps 20-5 years, blinked when he saw the name in the account and lifted a clearly insecure eyebrow. Bobby offered, his identification with a slight tremor in his hands, not for fear, not for weakness, but for the persistent damage of time and too many cold nights in non-name. "I just try to withdraw some funds," he said politely. "This account is in the name of Robert King. It has been a while." The cashier outlined a tense smile and typed. Then he paused. Something on the screen did not match what he expected. He called his manager. He was called Sidon. Impeccable haircut, tie too short. Type of mocking smile that does not need words to insult. He approached, looked at Bobby's documents, then Bobby himself, and released a giggle that was not friendly. "Are you sure that this account is his, Lord?" he asked, extending the Lord as if it were a joke. "This low form seems to be written in a dinosaur." The cashier laughed nervously. Bobby said nothing, simply put his hand in his coat and placed something on the counter with slow and careful fingers. A brass challenge currency recorded with a Thunderbird, you stars. Something that no civil would recognize, but that would make any real soldier contain his breath. Caden didn't even look at her. "Linda Baratija," he murmured. "Anyone can buy them online these days." He turned to the security and made a gesture towards the door. "I think we have another supposed veteran trying to take advantage of the system. Scrub it outside, please." The guard hesitated only a second, but enough for Bobby to listen to each word and for the rest of the bank to, gave an account. Some clients laughed behind their phones. One or two pretended not to hear. Bobby did not argue. He did not demand anything. He simply picked up the currency, gently slipped her back to her coat pocket, nodded once, and walked slowly towards a bank next to the window. There he sat erect, with his intertwined hands, the lost look in nothing, the laugh silencing, and a strange silence seized the bank's lobby. It wasn't guilt, not something colder, but discomfort, as if in the background people were no longer so sure. However, a person did not laugh. It was called Maya Rodriguez, about 30 and a few years old, former specialist in logistics of the Air Force, now working in defense hiring. I'd seen a currency like that once when a colonel retired from the JSOC. A joint command of special operations had come to inform his team and remembered how each officer in the room had stood up when he placed it on the table. He approached the counter, stared at the manager in the eye, and said, "You just made a mistake." Caden flicked. "I apologize," Maya said the bank. "That man is not a fake. Only that currency exceeds each payment check in this building." Caden snorted. "If it is so important, why is there anyone here with him?" Maya did not respond. She simply came out and made a call, but someone else had already noticed. In the rear office, an older employee, one of those discreet types of a lifetime, without a position. Important, but with all the knowledge I had heard Robe's name, URT King. He paused. Then he slowly walked to the corner of the room, where he hung a brass plate on the wall. He had been there since he opened the bank. dedicated to the Summit Rich Command Base and who built it. Among the recorded names, there were one that had not faded, Arkota Chin, the man who had supervised the original military infrastructure before the land became for civil use. The same man who was now being accused of falsifying the service history in the same bank that existed thanks to his command. The employee did not speak. He raised the phone, scored a number that only a handful of people knew by heart, and said only 6 words. "It's Bishop Coin Summit Rich is here." Then he hung outside. Bobby remained motionless like a stone. He did not get his phone. He did not put together a scandal. He simply observed how the wind was thrown out of the flag on the other side of the street and waited. No justice, no praise, but because that is what men like him have always done. They wait until they are needed. They even wait when nobody believes them. They expect while the world laughs. But what nobody knew in that bank, neither the manager nor the cashier, not even Maya, was that in 30 minutes that laugh would become silent. Because at the end of the street, a furious general had already crashed his phone against the desk. He had put on his gala uniform and was on his way to make sure the man, whom everyone they despised, the man they called fake, never overlooked. The next 20 minutes within the Summit Rich National Bank passed as molasses, slow, thick, uncomfortable, especially for those who had been laughing moments before. The cashier who had laughed between teeth. Now he kept his head, pretending to type, while they fall, the manager, walked from one place to another behind the counter, throwing occasional looks at the main doors, clearly agitated. Although I still didn't know why Bobby King hadn't moved. He was sitting exactly where they had been told to sit, as if this were just another waiting room in another government building. Only another day, in a long life of rows and cold looks. His hands rested on his cane, his straight shoulders despite the pain he did not talk about. And that currency of challenge, that currency remained saved, its presence as invisible to these people as their service. But the silence around him was different. Now it was no longer. The silence of disdain was the silence of doubt. Maya Rodriguez watched him from the other side of the lobby, with his arms crossed and lips tight with frustration. He had already made his call to a retired command contact at Fort Breckenridge, who only needed to hear Bishop Coin and Robert King so that his tone would change completely. "Do you say it is there now?" Drania had asked the voice. "Don't let him go." Maya did not know what would happen next. Batsu instinct told him that something was already in March. He was right. 2 blocks away, a black truck crossed traffic with lights flashing only once to point out authority without asking permission. Inside was the greatest General Everett Kane, awarded, feared, and famous for his precision, currently head of regional operations for 4 military districts and one of the only 5 living men authorized to provide an authorization of active recognition of the bishop level. When he received the call and listened to Robert's name, got up from his chair and only said 4 words to his assistant. "Uniform, we go." Ken was not just a name in a file for Can. He was the reason why Can wore stars on his shoulders. A living ghost, a man who believed himself out of circulation for a long time, the type of figure that was whispered in strategic meetings and reports of the legacy. Can had trained under the doctrine that Kanan helped write. He made that they would have insulted him publicly in uniform in a building that literally settled in land that once commanded, ignited something that the general rarely showed: rage. Meanwhile, back in the bank, Bobby adjusted his coat sleeve. The silent buzz of the fluorescent lights of the ceiling filled the air, but nobody spoke. A customer near the coffee station went awkwardly without making his deposit. A security guard was close to the exit, moving nervously, throwing sideways looks at the old man who had not done a single threat or raised his voice once, not even similar, but still seemed to radiate the type of presence that worrying a people accustomed to authority. Caden tried to ignore discomfort. "Keep here," he murmured, peeking over the box line. Seriously, he turned to one of the newest employees and snorted. He probably expects someone to publish him to get a donation for. Kitty online. Veterans do those things all the time. Maya's jaw was tensed, and the young woman in the window looked down. She even knew that this had gone too far. Caden lay on the counter as if he were proud of himself. I should have called the police. River, it's a matter of time before a scene arms. But just when the words came out of their mouths, the bank's glass doors opened suddenly, so that it was not ignored. No. A burst of wind, not a client, but an order. A chill toward the room. Boots, real boots. They hit the floor of surface tiles, or hurried, nor hesitant, deliberate. Major General Everett Kane entered. Complete gala uniform. Each shiny tape, each line of ironing with millimeter precision, a presence that filled all the lobby even of talking. Behind him, an assistant followed him, briefcase in one hand, solemn and silent. No one moved. The noise. He ceased instantly. The phones were hung, the coffee was half served, and Caden, still supported by the counter, looked up and then frozen. His mocking smile faded silently. Can did not look at anyone at the beginning. His eyes stuck directly into the bank next to the window where Bobby King was still sitting. And then, in front of the entire bank, the general square and greeted. The sound of that gesture, the snack of La Palma against 100, resonated stronger than any apology could never. Do it. Bobby looked up, confused only for a moment before rising slowly, returning the greeting with the dignity of someone who had not been greeted in years, but never forgot how to do it. Then Can turned slowly and toward the room with his eyes like a blade. His voice when he spoke was low, but acute enough to cut the glass. Who here called fraud to Colonel Robert King? Component placement asked each syllable in steel. No one responded to the beginning. Can took a step forward. Colonel King said again, emphasizing the range with chilling clarity. It was fundamental in the establishment of joint force recognition protocols that are still used in 3 nations. Its history covers 2 wars, 6 operations theaters, and 14 unrecognized operations. You questioned your identity. The looks turned to Caden. The manager seemed to vomit. I didn't know. Stuttering. His papers were old. Of course they are old. Component placement, Kane snapped. Because he has earned his age. He fought for this country while your biggest challenge was to learn to schedule tweets. The silence in the room changed again, from discomfort to shame. Kane's assistant took a step forward and opened a briefcase. Inside a thick folder marked as classified, a commemorative currency embedded in velvet and a printed copy of the same plate on the bank wall with the pronounced name of Robert King recorded in bold. Ken placed the folder on the counter. This bank exists thanks to its strategic design. That account that marked as suspicious financed the original supply lines from which you now benefit. He turned to Bobby in a softer voice. Now, sir, I'm sorry I didn't know before I was in the city. Bobby nodded tiredly. I didn't come to find me. I just needed enough to help my grandson with school. Can nodded slowly. So, let's make that happen. And together they approached the counter as Sidon backed up with his hands raised in silence. The missing laugh a long time ago, and the lesson just starting. The silence inside the Summit National Bank was no longer uncomfortable. It was reverent. Each person in that room had just witnessed a change, as if the soil itself remembered the weight that once sustained. General Everett Kane was standing next to Colonel Robert King at the counter, without barking orders, without asking punishments. Simply standing as if nothing else in the world imported, until this man obtained what he had come to look for. Bobby withdrew the funds in silence, without ceremony, to help his grandson to pay the university, something that had not even mentioned until the general asked. I didn't want attention. I had never loved her. Everything he always wanted was to fulfill his word with those for whom he fought and with that you who returned home. The cashier's hand was trembling while printing the receipt, whispering I apologize that Bob did not recognize. Not for resentment. I just didn't need it. He took the receipt, folded it once, and kept it in his pocket as if it were just another task fulfilled. But when he turned to leave, General Kane stopped him with one hand on his shoulder. Colonel has 5 minutes, he said. Bobby raised an eyebrow. So that? Can nodded to the room for the honor he never asked. And then, without a single command word, every veteran military in the room, from a young reservist next to the cashier, automatic to an old Navy toilet, filling a deposit sheet, straightened and greeted. Even civilians rose from their seats, not because they were told, but because something in the air told them. This is how a man like that is honored. Bobby was frozen for a second, not by pride, but for disbelief. Then he slowly returned the greeting with silent precision. Ken put his hand in his coat pocket and handed Bobby a small third hair box. "We have kept this for years," said. "I thought I would like to have it now." Inside there was a clean and polished medal, recorded only with a name and 3 words, "Service Beyond History." Bob stared at her for a long time, without tears, without speeches. Only a slow assent, as if he had finally closed a door that nobody else knew he was still open. Then he looked at Kane and said quietly, "I didn't come here to be remembered. I came to fulfill a promise." Kane nodded. "And in doing so, you reminded us all of what?" "Which really means the service." Bobby then came to sunlight. He was not followed by cameras. There were no headlines, but people inside straightened a little more. He spoke a little lower. Later, that week, a new line was added to the plate next to the main entrance of the bank. Under the original dedication, a second registration appeared. Robert J. Ken Colonel, U.S. Army. I did not mention the general, but all who worked there. They knew, because some truths do not need to shout to change everything. And now, every time a customer crosses those doors, he sees the name of the man they almost get out of the building between laughs. The man who said nothing until a furious general entered.